Hello friends, this is Dr. Amarjeet Kaur, Professor of Accounting and Business Communication at the Department of Management, Gurugram University, Gurugram. I have been working from last 32 years now. I have worked in the industry, food industry as well as into education. I have the opportunity to teach at two of the US universities. One is Valparaiso University, another is North Dakota State University. So, it is my privilege that I am here with you this day to talk on sources of long term finance, which is a long topic. We will be spending good time on this. So, sources of long term finance, as the name is the title is very much clear that we are going to talk about those sources which provide us funds for long term of the business needs or for the business need. So, friends, when we started this series on financial management, we talked about three major financial functions. One was investment function, second was financing function or decision, and the third is dividend decision. So, in the investment decision, we have discussed about capital budgeting. We have discussed so many techniques of capital budgeting, that where to invest, where not to invest, and how to evaluate our an investment proposal. That is what we discussed so far in the first decision. The second decision pertains to financing, and under financing we are going to begin this financing decision today, and under that I want to introduce first of all the sources of long term finance available to any business. Now, why would any business need funds? It is very simple. You all would understand that any business, either is an old one or a new one, they need funds. Funds or the money is the lifeblood for any company, for any business. They cannot survive without money. They need funds to buy plant, machinery, building, equipments, furniture, or even to buy raw material. So, businesses have requirement of funds forever. To grow, even the existing business, they would need funds to grow. So, they would need funds to actually buy supplies. So, this goes without saying that the long term finances are required everywhere, be it a small business or a large business, a new business or an old business, does not matter at all. Funds are required everywhere. And we are going to talk about the funds which provide us the money for long term. So, when it comes to sources of finance, we have both the possibility to get short term finance, and we have the possibility to get the finance for long term. Accordingly, we divide sources of finance into two broader categories. One is short term sources of finance, and the second is long term sources of finance. In the long term sources of finance, we have internal sources of long term finance and we have external sources of long term finance. So, we shall be discussing about them in detail. So, in internal sources of long term finance, we have three major sources of long term finance. The first one is, which internally funds us, is retained earnings. Second one is depreciation, and third one is sale of fixed assets. So, what is retained earning? As we are discussing retained earning in the context of source of long term finance. So, retained earning is the earning which is not distributed by the business, means profits which are retained, which are kept within the business. We do not distribute them in the form of dividend, or otherwise they are not drawn by the owners if it is a private company. So, the earnings which are kept, which are retained within the business, are retained earning. So, they certainly become a major source of finance which is available for long term, right. So, businesses which are able to grow with their own retained earnings are really very good, because they are not dependent on anyone else, they are not relying on outside sources of finance. They are earning and they are reinvesting those earnings into the growth of the business, right. So, that is what retained earnings are. Now, the second source of long term finance which comes internally from within the business is depreciation. how would depreciation be considered as a long term source of finance? So, what is depreciation? It's a charge against use of long term assets or non current assets. For example, if we purchased a machinery or a car or a building, anything you want to assume. So, every these three assets I mentioned, they have their own life. For example, building has its own life about 50 years. So, if we have spent 10 lakhs on the building and the life is 50 years, so you can divide and you can see how much of that building will be consumed every year. Something, if you have spent on a machinery, let us say 10 lakhs rupees and the life of the machinery is 10 years. So, it means if I am using the straight line method, my depreciation for the building would be 1 lakh every year. So, 10 lakhs is the total spending by the business against which you are charging depreciation and you are accumulating within the company. So, that depreciation is actually a non-cash expenditure. We are not paying depreciation to anybody. It is an accounting treatment against the use of a non-current asset, right. So, that 1 lakh in the first year, another 1 lakh second year, and at the end of the 5-year company would have 5 lakhs. So, those 5 lakhs are not paid to anybody, though the purpose of charging depreciation is to show it in the expenses to calculate the profit, because profit is the difference of revenue and expense, and expenses are the ones which are used or spent to generate revenue. So, to make a fair comparison, depreciation is charged and asset is purchased once only and the amount has been spent in the year when it was purchased. But after that cash has already gone out. So, cash has declined or bank balance has declined, but nevertheless this amount which we charge as depreciation against use of non-current asset, that is lying within the business, though we are accumulating it for replacing the asset in future, but nevertheless those funds are available and certainly can be used as internal source of finance to fund the new purchase of fixed asset in the long run, if nothing else, right. So, that is how depreciation is a source of internal long term finance. The third one, as I said, is the sale of fixed asset. So, how would sale of fixed asset become a long term source of finance for a company? It is because the moment we are selling current assets, inventory for example, or goods other way, for the purpose of generating revenue, and so that revenue is compared with the expenses to find out profit or loss. But when it comes to non-current assets, be it building, land, machinery, car, any means of transportation the company owns, everything has a certain life or certain useful life. So, we tend to sell those fixed assets after the completion of their useful life or before that. For example, car could be sold after 15 years of use as the current as per the current guidelines in NCR. The life of the petrol car is 15 years. Even EV has a 15 years of life as of today. So, we may sell it off after 15 years as a scrap or as a just a resale value for some other state, but we may sell that same car even after 5 years of use, 6 years of use, 7 years of use, and that amount is not our revenue from the business operations. That is an inflow of cash or a source of funds out of sale of non-current asset, right. So, this becomes internal source of financing. Businesses have buildings which they are not using for business operations, they are using it for renting, and in case they want to expand business and instead of that building they need to invest in plant. So, a business can sell off that building which is not in use of operations, but is generating rent non-operating income for the business, can be sold, and the funds out of those sales can be utilized as a source of long term finance, right. So, these three are the good examples of internal sources of long term finance. Now we will be talking about external sources of long term finance. There are many of them, and just a word of caution, I will not be able to cover all the sources of long term finance today. We will be taking up in these long term sources gradually over next 2-3 sessions in future as well. So, we will today cover equity or ordinary share for sure, followed by debentures. So, what are the external sources of long term finance? Primarily we have equity shares or ordinary shares, then we have debentures or bonds, which are also known as long term notes. Third is term loans, fourth is preference share capital, fifth is foreign capital FDI, sixth is innovative debt instrument, and in the innovative debt instruments we have many debt instruments like zero interest bonds, deep discount bonds, secured premium notes, floating rate bonds, callable or debentures or bonds, puttable debentures or bonds. So, this is a very big list of the innovative debt instrument other than the external sources we discussed about equity, debentures, term loan, preference share capital, etc. So, in detail I am going to get into these sources now. The first source I want to talk about is equity share, right. So, equity share is the share of a company which anybody would own, which shareholder owns. So, this is an ownership or the right of the ownership of some part of the equity or some part of the capital being issued to the general public. So, that is what the equity share is. So, this actually represent ownership right into the capital. So, when it comes to equity share capital, we have 4 different types of equity share capital: authorized, issued, subscribed and paid up. So, what is authorized? In the memorandum of the company, we have the maximum limit defined that this would be the total amount of the capital which a company can issue during its life. And we always assume the life of the business is infinite, is forever. It may end up, it may get insolvent, it may shut down very soon, but for the purpose of accounting we have an ongoing concept, right. So, basis on that ongoing concept, at the time of formation of a company, in the memorandum it is decided that during the life of the company may issue 1000 crore, 2000, 10,000 crore, whatever the amount it has been envisioned at that time when the company was formed, that amount is non-authorized. So, question comes in, can we change it ever? Yes, by making the changes in the memorandum with the help of general body is with the help of voting, we can make the changes, but it is not something very common. It is generally the companies, when companies are formed, the authorized capital is really being kept very high. So, this was first type of equity share which is taken as authorized one. The second type is issued. So, let us say if 100 crore was the authorized capital and 100 crore is to be used during the life of the business. So, business when it starts may need only 5 crore, 10 crore, 20 crore, 30 crore, etc. right. So, out of the authorized, the part which is issued to the general public is known as issued share capital. It is issued to be subscribed by the general public, right, and that issued is decided basis on the need, the expansion, the growth opportunities a business has, right. So, issued is the part of the authorized only. Now, out of issued, how much is been actually accepted by the general public, by the prospective shareholders. So, let us say we issued capital for 5 crore, but against that the people who applied to subscribe it, who applied to buy it is actually 4 crore 80 lakhs. So, my subscribed becomes 4 crore 80 lakhs. So, 20 lakhs is not subscribed. There are certain technical ways that this unsubscribed is actually taken care by the merchant bankers or the underwriters, etc., etc. But otherwise here I want to explain the type of equity share first. So, subscribed is part of the issued which has been accepted or applied against by the general public. Now, out of the subscribed, how much is being paid up? So, how much is actually being paid for by the general public is paid up capital. Let us say if a subscribed was 5 crore, out of that company wants that amount to be paid in 3 installment, 4 installment. So, immediately people who applied for it is total 5 crore, out of that company immediately needs within 30 days 1 crore, because capital is issued for some purpose, some project for example. So, that project there we need to pay 1 crore outrightly, and after that completion of 20%, 30% work, or otherwise to buy machinery etc., after the building is purchased for 1 crore, let us say. So, then next thing is to buy plant machinery etc. Company may call up for the next 3 crores, and then another 1 crore for some furniture, then last 1 crore for something else, right. So, amount which is actually being paid for or paid against the application is paid up capital. So, these are the types of equity share capital. Now, I want to talk about the characteristics of the equity share capital. So, let us discuss about the characteristics. So, equity shares have certain features, certain characteristics. The first one is claim on residual income. The second one is claim on residual assets. The third one is right to control. The fourth one is voting right. Fifth one is preemptive right, and the last is limited liability. So, I will be explaining all these points in detail now. So, claim on residual income, what does it mean? So, this particular feature is peculiar to equity shares only, which means that equity shareholders, the person who holds or who owns up the share of a company is, or who is known as equity shareholder, right. So, that shareholder will have right on the income of the company only after the income is being utilized to pay the interest on debentures, interest on bonds and preference dividend. Then whatever is left is available to be paid to equity shareholders, and that too on the discretion of the company or the board, which means the company may have profits if after paying interest, after paying dividend to preferential capital, preferential holders, even then company may decide not to pay. But as far as the claim is concerned, their claim is only to the residual income. So, left out income means income available after paying these two heads I said. That was the first feature. The second, as I said, is claim on residual asset. When it would come into force, this would come in force when company is going to wind up or going to get like going to close down or shut down. So, when company is going to shut down or maybe declared insolvent, even in that same case, the residual assets, the assets are firstly used to pay the principal, interest, whatever was due to the all the debenture holders, bond holders, and then to all other trade payables etc., it means all liabilities. After that, the company would pay to the preference shareholders, and if after paying all these liabilities and the preference shareholders, if any asset is left out, that asset would be sold or to pay to the equity shareholders. So, it is again a residual right against assets. So, it is primarily because companies are assumed to be going forever. So, this is primary in the case of closing or shutting down of the company or technical insolvency of the company. So, this was the second characteristics of the equity share. The third characteristic is the right to control. So, right to control is a very important right, where the business is run though by the board members with the help of directors, but the every single shareholders can exercise control in the decisions in the day-to-day operations through their voting right, because they have voting right. So, another feature is of course voting right, other characteristic is voting right. So, control of the business means the operations can be taken care, shareholders who are interested, who are parties, who wants to get engaged, they can actually take participation into the daily operations through the votes. And people who are very active, they have good number of shares, they could be appointed as directors as well, as a board members as well. So, that is how shareholders can participate in the business operation and they exercise control. Another feature, another characteristic is the voting right. Equity shareholder, every shareholder has right to vote into the decision making. So, that is peculiar because preference shareholders do not have right in general. There are exceptional cases, we will discuss it when we will talk about preference shares in future, but voting right is only a special right available to equity shareholders only. So, they actually are owners, they actually are the people who participate into the daily operations. Then we have preemptive right. So, what is preempt? So, preempt means something to to assume in advance or empt in advance. So, emptive right is the right of shareholders in a situations when company wants to issue any public issue after the first issue, means after IPO, initial public offering, whenever we have subsequent issue of shares. So, one is the IPO, the initial public offer, and that gives the ownership to the shareholders and they become the current shareholders, right. So, now I am talking about the right of the current shareholders who become part of the company or owners through the IPO. Now, those people, those shareholders have the right, first right to buy shares if any subsequent issue of shares is made, be it second issue, be it third or fourth or subsequents, right. So, that is what is known as preemptive right, right to participate into the issue of shares when any subsequent issue is made. So, then the last characteristic of the share, equity share is limited liability. So, what is limited liability? The limited liability means those shareholders exercise or they enjoy control, they enjoy right to vote even, but nevertheless their liability is limited to the extent of the ownership they have. It does not go beyond the amount of their investment. It means these people would have only the liability to the extent they have invested. So, it means in case a company is getting insolvent, I as a shareholder would be liable to pay to the extent I have the shareholders holding right or the value of my shares. So, beyond that the company's assets would be sold. First of all, assets are sold and after that the person is liable to the extent the value is there, not beyond than that. So, these were the characteristics of equity share. Now, the question comes in the merits and the demerits of the equity shares. So, what are the merits of equity share? So, there are a couple of merits or advantages of equity share, both from owner's perspective, owners means the shareholders perspective, or from the business perspective. So, we shall be discussing both merits from both the perspectives. So, first and the foremost merit is permanent source of finance. So, equity share is a permanent source of finance. How come? Because company gets these funds through equity shares for permanent basis, because equity shares are never paid in the life of the business. Preference shares are redeemable, there is an option to redeem preference share, but equity shares are never redeemed, means whatever I bought as a shareholder, I I am going to be shareholder there unless I decide to sell off the shares in the market, right. But for the company's perspective, this is a permanent source. The shareholders may get exchanged, in the market, open market, but that share remains there and that funds remains with the company. So, that is how it is a permanent source of finance for the company. Then enhancing credit worthiness of the company. So, it enhances the credit worthiness of the company. What does it mean? Because equity shareholders are the people who have invested, right. So, people have invested because they believe in the credit worthiness of the company. They believe the company has potential to generate revenue and pay and give them dividend, and that gives confidence to the people to who are the possible lenders who can lend money to the company, right. So, this increases the company's worthiness because these people have invested their money. So, company's credit worthiness in the market goes up and company is able to get loans, debentures, bonds, etc. means company can actually take advances from the market because of this credit worthiness generated through the shareholders capital. Then the next benefit to the company is discretion of dividend payment. The company has a discretion to pay dividend or not, because for preference shareholders company need to pay, but here in the equity shareholders there is no such obligation for a company to pay the dividend. Company has a choice. If company has an opportunity to grow, its company sees that it can grow further, company may decide not to pay dividend in that particular year. So, these were the benefits of equity shares from company's perspective. We will continue with the discussion in the next half as well, because this is the first part where we discussed what are the possible sources of equity share, internal source of finance, what are the possible sources of external sources of finance for a company, and within the external sources we were discussing the first and the foremost source, equity shares. We have discussed the characteristics and the types of equity share, and we were discussing equity shares from merits from company's perspective. We shall be discussing the merits from the shareholders perspective in the next session. Thank you very much. Time to sign off.